All right, welcome back to My Mom's Basement. We are down here in Tampa. We're all tested. We're ready to go and ready for WrestleMania. I'm sorry, that's like a ricochet shot, it feels like, at Brandon Walker. We had someone that was supposed to come here. He tested positive. Tragic. He'll be here next year. Brandon Walker, we'll get you next year. I am here with the Drip Master himself, Mr. Seth Rollins. Seth, you've got a match night one of WrestleMania. It's going to be streaming live on Peacock against Cesaro. I want to set the stage and ask you right off the bat, what was the first match that you ever remember with Cesaro? What do you remember about it?
First of all, Drip God.
I'm sorry.
Drip a God.
Do we spell that with G-A-W-D?
Multiple W's.
Okay.
Lots of W's. I can't count them all. Lots of them. You can make up the number, but it's got to be more than one.
At least 37.
At least, yeah. That's where we're at. So that's a long. But yeah, it's WrestleMania, man. It sucks about your colleague. That's really unfortunate. Missing WrestleMania is a heartbreaker. I know. I've been there. My first match with Cesaro that I can remember was in Ring of Honor we did a weird TV taping or shows in was it Memphis maybe? No, was it Memphis? God, it was somewhere in it was Louisiana or Louisville. And we wrestled in one of our first singles matches there. It was like a high-profile singles match for the first time. And that was the first one that really comes to mind. It was a barn burner. So,
yeah.
And that was, we're talking over 10 years ago. No, for a long time. So, that was 15 years maybe. It's been a wild ride.
And you guys have been in the ring together quite a bit. Do you have a favorite moment or a favorite match that you've been in the ring with Cesaro for?
Man, we had what I feel like were some of the best tag title matches in recent memory between the Bar and myself and Ambrose. And that story, the kind of reunification of the Shield, doesn't really work without Sheamus and Cesaro. They were amazing through that whole thing, and to be able to have those matches and have that story was really good. And I think those SummerSlam where his teeth went through his mouth,
yeah.
And then we did one at, I think it was at No Mercy as well, or one of those follow-up pay-per-views with the wacky names. But there were a couple there on pay-per-view that were, I think, pretty special.
That one that you're referencing when his teeth got pushed into his gums, that's one tough guy, huh?
Yeah, I don't even like talking about it, to be fair. Woo!
Yeah, that's rough.
Just the thought of it. I was in the ring or on the apron when it happened, and I remember hearing the noise of it, thinking, oh, he really slapped the top of that guardrail good. And then he came off the cover because Ambrose had slingshot him into it, I believe.
Yeah.
And he came off and he came up onto his knees, and the whole crowd, because he went away from me, and the whole crowd just goes, whoa. I remember that everyone was taken aback because it was such a horrific moment that I saw him when he turned around. I was like, oh my God, this match is over. We need to stop. Nope, we just wrestled the whole thing. Went right through it. It was pretty wild.
And he's known as a wrestler with a crazy strength, right? We look back at that WrestleMania 30 moment where he picked the Big Show up and threw him over the top rope. When you're wrestling him, do you kind of feel that when he's maybe swinging you, or is that something that's obvious when he's in the ring with you, or no?
You had to bring up the swing, didn't you? Swing. Yeah, look, when I get asked all the time, who's the strongest guy you've ever been in the ring with? Look, there are obvious ones, right? Brock Lesnar comes to mind. John Cena comes to mind. These guys who are kind of Herculean in the way they look. And I'm not taking anything away from Cesaro's look, but he's, a good 30, 40, 50 pounds smaller than some of those guys. But his pound-for-pound strength, I think, is unparalleled. It is. If you watch, there was a recent SmackDown a few weeks ago where we got into a bit of a scuffle in the ring, and he picked me up in a gut wrench like I was a small child, literally the way I picked my baby up from the crib. And I was like, what is this? I'm a full-grown man. I weigh 215 pounds, and he just launched me like I was nothing. And I'm like, I have no control over this, and that's kind of how it feels to be in the swing. And that's terrifying. It's not. Luckily, he can control himself,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely scary.
Yeah, the swing does not look like a fun move to take.
You've been to the carnival. You've been on the scrambler. That's what it's like, or those ones where you're just like
is it the
pressed against the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you're like, and you get off, and that's literally what it feels like. And it's worse kind of because you're upside down-ish, or all the blood's rushing to your head. You're not upright. you're upside down, and it's a mess. That's not fun. It's not fun at all.
We are here for WrestleMania week. Do you remember the first WrestleMania you ever watched live?
Live? Ooh, that's a tough one. I used to get them on VHS tape.
The Coliseum video?
Yeah, I used to get them on VHS. There was a place by me called D&G Video. I'm predating Blockbuster here probably even. It was a local video store, and that's where I used to get my video games and TV videos, like pay-per-views from. And because we were kind of too poor to order the pay-per-views, and so, or we didn't even have you had to have like a box for it or something. God, kids, you don't even know. Point is, I couldn't access the pay-per-views. I had to wait till they came out, and WrestleMania 6 was the first one that I remember watching over and over and over and over. Maybe WrestleMania 4 would have been the first one that I saw. But it's tough. It's tough to say because it might have been 6, man. Because 4 was, I would have been 2 or 3 something when it came out. So yeah, I think WrestleMania 6 is probably the first one I remember. It's the first one that captivated me. Hogan and Warrior.
6 was actually like kind of my introduction to wrestling because I was born in '98. So by the time I was 3 or 4 years old, my brother wanted to show me wrestling, but he couldn't show me the current product. It was a little edgy for a 3 or 4 year old. So he said, "I'll show you my favorite WrestleMania ever." He was a big Ultimate Warrior fan. So he showed me WrestleMania 6, and I would watch that over and over again. There's this spot where Hogan goes to the outside and he tells the referee his knee's hurting him. And I remember always saying to my brother, "Thank God he didn't really get injured there so they could finish the match." My brother just being like, "Yeah, thank God, Rob."
Yeah, we were a divided household because my brother was a big Ultimate Warrior fan and I was a Hulk Hogan guy, and so it did not, I was bitter for quite some time.
Of course.
And we watched that all the time. So yeah, he'd win on that one.
So let's talk about your WrestleMania journey. Starting with WrestleMania 29, I was at WrestleMania 29. You guys kicked the show off, The Shield versus Sheamus, The Big Show, and Randy Orton. What do you remember about your first WrestleMania experience there?
Man, I think the entrance. That was probably the biggest one because we had done the entrance for a few months and it had started to pick up steam. People had started to notice where we were going to come out, and they would try to get up there and be prepared for it or whatever at the arenas. It's just a different animal at WrestleMania in front of 70,000, 80,000 people and those long walks. And I remember we had to walk on the floor, but there was a point where we stood up on some, I don't know what they were, some speakers or something set up there. But that's the first time I had performed in front of a crowd of that size. So I remember the entrance more than anything. And I remember going into WrestleMania thinking, we have to win this match. Like, it's vital for us. And you're going in against the kind of like people that you talked about there from a legendary standpoint. Like, you don't know how it's going to shake out. But it made perfect sense, and it felt right, and it worked so well, and I loved it. I loved for a WrestleMania debut, it probably couldn't have been any better, to be honest. Because I'm someone who's always I've liked to work my way up. Obviously, you want to start in the main event, but there's nowhere else to go but down after that. So to start in the opening match, we had a lot of buzz at that point, and so to come out and do our thing and do it with legends, it was pretty cool.
And you got to continue that trend the following year. WrestleMania 30 had another match against a couple legends.
Trounced
Kane, WWE Hall of Famer this year, and the New Age Outlaws. What do you remember looking back at that one? It was a quick match, but once again, you got to be in the ring with a couple of legends at WrestleMania, right?
Yeah, we were Legion of Doom that night, man. We were unstoppable. The masks obviously was the talk of that WrestleMania. But look, it was short by necessity because Rock, Stone Cold, and Hogan decided to ramble on for a half hour and soak up their.
Was that supposed to be longer?
No, our match, of course, yes,
okay.
Of course. Everything in the first half of that show was. But they also the first match was Triple H versus Bryan, right? And so of course that's the story of the show. That's the one that. So these things need to take time. But now we're an hour and a half into the show and we've had one match, and it's like, all right. We got to go. This was before the era of, or the kind of the beginning of the era of 26-hour WrestleManias. And so, it was short by necessity, not by design.
Does that give you anxiety when you sense the match is about to get shortened, or you're like, we got to do what we got to do?
No, of course. And it's WrestleMania because you want to be out there and you want to put on a show, And it was tough to have to compromise that because of because of somebody else. But you go, okay, this is where I'm at. I'm going to get there one day. Somebody else is going to go short one of these days because I'm going to take my time. And so you go, okay, understandable, respect to all those guys, those people that I mentioned, the 5 of them, the 2 in the match and then the promo. They're legends. They're Hall of Famers. They paved the way. I wouldn't be there if it wasn't for them. So do what you got to do. We'll make it work. And one day I'll be in your shoes, and I'll make up for it. But yeah, it was a cool thing, and it was a marquee moment in the history of the Shield and in my career as well. So I thought it was, for what it was all it needed to be.
Moving on, WrestleMania 31. This was my favorite wrestling event I ever attended personally. It was such a fun time as a fan. I traveled out there, and you got such premier moments, 2 premier moments. You had a match with Randy Orton early on in the card, and you get the RKO spot that was the talk of the card. And then you closed the show by cashing in Money in the Bank and having one of the most legendary already moments that closed WrestleMania ever. What was that like? Looking back, does that feel surreal already that happened?
Yeah, I was talking about this earlier today, and because somebody asked me which moment I would like to relive, whether it be the Universal title match with Lesnar from a few years back or the cash-in. And for me, it's the cash-in, not because it's the bigger moment, which I think that it is, but also because I can only really relive it in images. Like I relive it in video, and it's like a memory you have from your childhood that you're not sure is a memory or a story you've been told so many times that it's real. And so it's, when it happened so fast, and I didn't get the opportunity to like really feel everything that was going on because it was just in and out in, a couple of minutes.
It's chaos, yeah.
Yeah, and so I'll never forget the panic. Like I remember sitting in the chair in Gorilla before I came out. I never forget that feeling, but everything after that, the run down the aisle, the cash in, it's all just, again, it feels like somebody else lived that, and I never really did. And even that night, I didn't even have a chance to like hang out and celebrate and have a drink with my family. I was on a jet to do the Today Show in New York because they're 3 hours ahead, so they're like, we gotta go. And so it was all just such a whirlwind, and then I had to come back to, I came back to San Jose for Raw the next day. But yeah, man, that was chaos. It never feels like it was me. It always feels like somebody else lived that, and I got all the credit.
What was going through your mind when you're sitting there in Gorilla, like you said, and watching Lesnar and Roman tear the house down? That was obviously like a great match even before you ran in. Like, is it just pure panic? Is it pure running through what you have to do?
Yeah, I mean, it was just going over the scenario in my head, and also like we were running very late on time at that point, and so it was like, oh, are we going to have time to fit all this in? Is it going to happen? Oh my God, it's not going to happen. We're going to go off the air, and I'm not going to be able to do this. And this has been my baby.
Just every worst case scenario, right?
Of course, you go out where it's not happening, because it never happens until it happens in WWE. The best laid plans always change, and so. That was one of my better laid plans, I would say. So I was hoping that it wouldn't change. And yeah, so it was just kind of running that whole process through and hoping that I was going to be able to get out there. And then as they started rolling through, that kind of sequence, I was like, all right, here we go, don't trip.
That whole moment is so amazing. Michael Cole's call, the heist of the century, the camera shot of you running down the ramp, it was really like picture perfect. The next year, WrestleMania 32, as well documented, you had to miss out on. You were injured, then you got to come back at WrestleMania 33 and have a really premier spot on the card against Triple H. Was that match, when it was all said and done, everything you thought it would be when you were sitting there at WrestleMania 32 missing out on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, because I believe WrestleMania 32 was meant to be Triple H and myself as well. We got to get to it a year later. And I wasn't 100% at that point, because I had come back from the injury, but it takes some time to get back into ring shape, and then I tore my MCL again leading into that match with Triple H, and so I just wasn't really 100%. Looking back at it, I think that I'm proud of the performance. I'm proud of the fact that, literally full torn MCL in my right knee 2 months before it happened. And so the fact that I was able to get out there and do what I did. And don't get me wrong, there were some really great moments in that match. And
cool entrances, right? You got like a really premier entrance at WrestleMania.
The entrance was great. It would have been better. There was going to be flames, so like I had the torch and I put it down, and then the flame was going to go down. And it was going to shoot pyro on the ring, but Hunter and Steph were in the ring, and it was windy, and so from a safety standpoint, they had to cancel that fire. So it would have actually been even bigger than it was. But yeah, they had to shut that pyro down, and so. The entrances were cool. It's kind of the first year I got like a signature entrance. Yep. And then, the performance was good, not great. Again, I was happy with the end product, and to be in the ring with someone like Triple H and learn from him in that way. He'd been a mentor to me for years at that point, to be able to have that story that we had really started. We told it, years before in the Authority and stuff, but we'd really kind of picked it up there when he pedigreed me and got Kevin Owens the title. And so to be able to kind of get back around to that and tell that story and get to that match, it was nice closure to do all that. And I felt like it was good. Again, not great on my behalf. I felt like I could have been better, but won't make excuses. I was banged up, but that's one I wish I would love to do again, or if I was a little bit healthier.
Yeah. The next year, you get to open the show again, WrestleMania 34. You have an Intercontinental Championship match against The Miz and Finn Balor. I thought this was an awesome match. You kind of get another premier entrance, right? The White Walker stuff. I would love to ask you about Game of Thrones later on as well. Looking back at that match, opening the show, getting that spot on the card. Did you like opening the show, WrestleMania 34?
Yeah, I pitched to open the show that year.
Oh, wow, interesting.
Yeah, I pitched to open the show that year, and because you look at the WrestleMania cards and you go, okay, there's a couple, especially when we were just doing one night, it was stacked. It was 12 matches or more, and a lot of stuff gets lost, right? There's a lot of stuff in the middle that it's big moments, but it's lost, and you kind of only take away these major milestone moments from WrestleMania. And so one of those things is having a really great opening match. People remember that. They remember how things start, they remember how things finish, and then if you're lucky, you get one moment in the middle. And so, I was all for, I was like, give me that number one, give me that number one. And I knew Miz and I had great chemistry. Finn and I had great chemistry, and so I figured the three of us, I knew we had something good to work with, and I knew the story was good, I knew the entrance was going to be cool, and so, and at that point too, I was really starting to climb as a babyface. I was really starting to rise going into that match, and so I felt like all of that was going to lead to a really exciting opener and something that people would, when they say, "Oh, what's the best opening match in WrestleMania history?" Like that's one of the ones that comes to mind, and so that's a cool thing, and it's always fun to start off the show with a title change and a fresh, hot crowd that's not tired from sitting there for 7 hours.
And you got to do it again the next year, WrestleMania 35 at MetLife.
Different circumstances, but yes.
Yep, you have the match with Brock. Were you freezing in the ring? Because I was freezing in the stands.
No, because it was early.
Okay, it was early enough, yeah.
Yeah, the sun was still out, it was still decent. So we were actually, legitimately up until a half hour before the event, we were meant to go on second to last. That's why you see, because I think it was a Hogan promo opens the show, and Heyman interrupts him. And Hogan didn't even know that was going to happen. He had no clue. So that's why when you watch it back and you see Hogan's look of like, what the heck? Like that's real. That's a real look. He didn't even know that's how close it was to the change. And the theory was, again, we are stacking. We didn't want to take away anything from the girls' main event.
Yep.
And we felt like stacking the two matches back to back, we were going to lose some luster, and the girls were going to lose some luster. And so we were like, Heyman, he's like, hey, well, let's start it off. Let's do something totally different. When have you seen a world championship match of this caliber start WrestleMania? And you know how the Brock matches are.
Totally.
They're brutal and quick, and anything can happen at any second. And so, again, a great way to start the show off, but something completely unpredictable, and you're never going to forget it. It's the same thing. What's your favorite moment to start WrestleMania? Again, it's in the conversation. And so, totally different from the year previous, but same sort of idea.
Did winning the title feel any different, being that it was such a thrown together, not the match or feud was thrown together, but the timing of it? Did actually winning it feel weird?
Yeah, of course. It felt, what felt weird was the aftermath, because now I'm just sitting through the whole show.
Yeah.
I think
sitting there with the title on.
Well, because you do all you do all the ESPN and the interviews right after, and now it was 4 hours of WrestleMania left before I watched Becky go out and do her thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was totally a different experience than what I expected, and I don't remember when they announced that the girls were going to go on last. But when we were telling the story and you've got a WrestleMania title match with Brock Lesnar, in your brain you go, oh, we got a shot at going on last here. 9 times out of 10, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I'm going, I imagine things in a certain way going into it. Luckily, they announced early on, or at least a couple weeks ahead of time, that the girls were going to go on last, so I had a couple weeks to kind of figure out what the feeling was going to be like. But yeah, I didn't expect to go on first, and I didn't expect to have that vibe coming out of it. But the energy was on another level. People were through the roof again, and so it's cool going back to New York from the first one, knowing how that started, the opening match, and then again, opening match. If we go back, it might just have to be a thing.
Yeah, it's the new New York WrestleMania. Rollins is opening the show.
Yeah, I'm opening the show. Yeah, hopefully not forever.
Finally getting to last year, you had what I believed was a show-stealing match with Kevin Owens. I thought it was one of the early highlights of the pandemic-era wrestling, where people went, okay, this has something. Maybe we don't need a full crowd. Had some crazy spots, right, where he jumps off the WrestleMania sign through the table. I talked to him yesterday, and he said as soon as he found out that WrestleMania was going to be in the Performance Center, he thought, I want to make this special. I feel like this building is special, and we have an opportunity to make this special. Did you feel the same way?
Yeah, it was different because we'd had the story and the build up for a few months, and we kind of knew where we were sort of heading. There'd been a lot of talk about doing a big multi-man match. At that point, I had AOP and Murphy on my side, and Kevin was working with the Vikings, and Samoa Joe was available, I think, around that time, or may have gotten injured. But there was a lot of moving parts, and I think when it boiled down, especially when we got closer to WrestleMania, it boiled back down to me and Kevin, which is where we wanted it to be. And then we added in kind of the element. Like, it would have been cool to do the match in front of a live crowd or even in a big arena or whatever, but to go to the Performance Center where Kevin trained and kind of where I came up in that system, it allowed us to layer the story a little bit differently. And yeah, to be fair, going into that WrestleMania, it was such chaos.
Yeah.
Figuring out how that was going to work.
It was like the earliest pandemic vibes, too. Nobody really knew what the deal with that was.
Nobody knew what was going on. So, we were able to have a little more leeway on what we wanted to do story-wise. It didn't have to go through it didn't have to get checked off. All the boxes didn't have to get checked off. And so we were able to go out and cut promos that I felt were really good.
Yeah, they were.
In the weeks leading up to the show. And then the performance was what it was, and I loved it. I thought it was a great match and a great story. And from the very beginning, watching some of the pandemic era stuff, there were just things that I saw that weren't working and things that I saw that were working. And so it was just about how can we make this different? We can't just continue to do the same thing. If we continue to do the same thing in front of no people, it's going to be monotonous for our audience. It's going to be boring. We have to figure out how can this be entertaining in its own way. And one of the things that you could do now with no audience was talk a lot during your matches and fill kind of that space. And it's funny because I have a wrestling school, and one of the things that new students do a lot is they don't make any noise when they're having practice matches. They're very quiet and they just kind of go through the motion. And I'm like, that's not wrestling.
Yeah.
You guys are missing out. That's not wrestling. Wrestling is this big emotional showcase, and that includes your voice, that includes your expressions, that includes noise. And so you have to make some noise. We're not mimes in here, And so I had all that in the back of my head as we're going through this match with Kevin, and it really worked. We didn't have I think that and the cinematic matches were kind of the big to do wrestling can be okay in front of no people if you do it the right way. So I was just trying to make the best of a tough situation, and I thought we came out with a pretty good story and a great match.
I think so as well. All right, I only got a couple more questions for you. Every time I interview you, I got to ask you what's on the Seth Rollins playlist. It's WrestleMania week. I think last time you said it was Sister Cities, the Wonder Years.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a big pop punk fan myself, so you got anything pop punk for me?
A controversial opinion. I love the New Day to Remember record.
Oh yeah, I saw a lot of people kind of crapping on that.
Yeah.
I haven't listened to it myself.
Yeah, I mean it's an eclectic record. It's not a heavy A Day to Remember record. It's more rock vibes than anything, but they do a lot of different stuff and they try a lot of different stuff that they're not used to. It came out maybe a month or two ago, and I'm friends with Kevin Scaff, the guitarist, and so Kevin played me these demos. Man, dude, it's got to be 3 years ago, and I remember thinking, "You're gonna make songs out of this? This is not a Day to Remember." He's like, "Dude, we're old guys now. We're just making music. We don't care. We're not trying to make it a Day to Remember record." Totally. And I was like, respect. So I was cool to see what the demos were, and now hear the songs. And it's a good album, and I've been enjoying it. So that's kind of been on the main rotation as of late.
All right, I appreciate that. I respect that. Game of Thrones, referenced it before. When I tweeted earlier that I had an interview with you today, the #1 tweet I got in response was, can you ask him what he thought about the final season of Game of Thrones?
Really?
The White Walker stuff, yeah. So I'm going to throw it to the My Mom's Basement listeners. What did you think about the final season of Game of Thrones?
I loved it. So
did you really?
Yeah. So
wow.
So here, and I'll tell you why. I think people were expectation will ruin anything for you. Of course. Will ruin anything. So in the beginning of the pandemic, Becky had never watched Game of Thrones. And I'm always like, you gotta watch it. It's so good. Like, just get to the end of the first season and you're in.
You're
hooked. I promise. The first season's a little, it's a lot to take in at first. These houses, these characters, these story, I'm like, just get to the end of the first season and you'll be in. So beginning of pandemic, we started, and I got her through the first season, and of course I was right. By the end of the first season, she was hooked
immediately. Yep.
And then we watched them all straight through. And when you watch all of it straight through in totality, the crescendo of the final season feels right.
Feels better, yeah.
Yeah, it feels right. As a standalone season, it's not my favorite season, and I go, okay, yeah, as a standalone season, it doesn't all really, it feels rushed. But when you look at the totality of the show and the 10 years or whatever that it was on, it builds nicely, and that final season really feels like just all hell broke loose, And sure, the wars will take longer in real life. I don't care.
That stuff I don't care about
I
either.
don't care.
The people that got mad when the Night King threw the javelin, they're like, he could never throw it that far. What are we talking about at this point?
Yeah, dude. We can't argue logistics in a fantasy world. But, I mean, the Long Night episode is the greatest episode of television I've ever seen. We watched it. I've seen it multiple times now. But watching it back with Becky, because it was one of those where we had binged a few, and it was late. It was like, I don't remember. It was like 3. It was probably close to 3 in the morning, and because pandemic time.
Of course, doesn't matter. Yeah,
it's all gone. So it was, and she was pregnant, so she wasn't going to work at all. I was like, whatever. We were probably still taping shows, so I might have had 3 weeks off, and I knew what was coming, and we watched a couple of them, and that one was next, and I was like, oh man. And you get that feeling, and I'm like, I don't want to tell you this, but the next one is my favorite episode in the whole series. And she was like, I'm tired, but will I be able to stay awake? And I'm like, I think so. And dude, I mean, from the beginning, the get-go, that's the best episode in the history of television, I think.
So Becky, someone that didn't watch Game of Thrones weekly, did she also enjoy the ending of it? She was fine with it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, because she hated Daenerys from the get-go.
There you go.
She knew Daenerys she hated her from
she
day
knew she
one.
was a snake.
She's like, I don't like this girl. And I'm like, really? Because not like, when I watched it, not knowing how it was going to go ever, I was always a fan of Daenerys. I thought
so
she was
I.
great.
Yeah, I thought maybe she could end up on the throne.
Yeah, but she watched it. She's like, no, something evil about her, man. I don't like her. I'm not into it. And so
the whole time you had to be like,
I'm like, really? But this, but that, and then the stuff with Jon, and she's like, what's wrong with her? She doesn't understand what he doesn't want to be incestuous, And I'm like, yeah, but it's it's the thing back then. It's not a big deal. And she's like, no, something's off. I don't like her. And so she watched it, and by the end of it, I was like, people didn't really like that last season, and she's like, what are you talking about? I don't like it. But we watched it straight through, and I just feel like it's a different vibe when you do it that way.
It definitely is. I had that with Lost. I didn't watch Lost weekly, but I watched it as a binge, and I was like, that was great. And everyone I talked to that watched it weekly is like, didn't you hate that final season? And I was like, no, I thought it was fine, actually.
Yeah.
Final question for you. Did you know that Hornswoggle is making his boxing debut with Barstool Sports this month?
Oh, God bless Dylan. Is he really?
I wanted to ask your opinion on it. I could show you a video of his opponent. He's for real making his boxing debut with us at Rough and Rowdy.
It's got to be, it's a little person, right?
It is.
It's full little person boxing?
This is our current champion.
Okay. Okay.
He's actually kind of a savage.
Man.
He's knocked out former opponents. And Hornswoggle is going to be stepping into the ring. I wanted to know if you had any words of encouragement, any thoughts on it.
Has Dylan, oh no, this guy's a house.
He is.
This guy's a house. Has Dylan been training for this?
We don't know. So after this guy's last fight, after he defended his championship successfully at the last Rough and Rowdy, Dylan called him out. He said, I want in. I think I could take him down.
And this is just straight boxing?
Straight boxing.
No MMA?
3 one-minute rounds. Straight boxing.
Oh, wow. This guy knocks people out in 1 minute rounds?
Yeah.
I'm gonna...
Comes across the ring running.
Dude. Yeah, he looks like Brock Lesnar. Like a little mini Brock Lesnar. He is. I see him here in a West Side Barbell shirt.
He deadlifts like 400 pounds.
He's no joke.
I mean,
he's got a bit of an advantage. He only has to...
He doesn't have to, not as much.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Yeah, man. Dylan doesn't look great here. He doesn't look great. I mean, look... If he can talk him into the room, it could be, a Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather situation. Get that money. I respect, but I am afraid. I fear for Dylan.
Okay.
I fear for his safety. Yeah.
Okay.
Do they wear headgear, or does they just?
There will not be headgear for this event. No.
Dylan, I hope the best for you, my friend. You've been a great friend for a long time, but I think you're going to get knocked out by this guy. This guy, I would be scared to box this guy. So. Bless you. Bless
Perfect.
You. Good luck. Good
Seth
luck,
Rollins,
my friend.
Thank you so much. WrestleMania, he's going to be on night 1, match against Cesaro. I think it's going to steal the show as well. I'm looking forward to it very much.
No pressure.